Hey guys, I am super happy to be back with you. Today we are going to be talking about alley-oops. Alley-oop? I think maybe it's alley-oops. I usually say alley-oops, but whatever you call it, I'm going to walk you through kind of a detailed analysis of how to land one and how to get better at them. It's not far away from like every surfer's capabilities. That might sound crazy because when you think of this move, you think of the big, airs that John, Kelly Slater, Noah Dean, Jordy Smith. I think of some really big alley-oops I've seen people do before. It seems like this really technical, really hard move to do. But the truth is, in my opinion, this move is much more attainable, much more possible for the average surfer than you might think. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding so that you can go out in the ocean and get a lot closer or possibly land your first alley-oop. Just a standard alley-oop is just a rotation against the direction that you usually would go. If you're doing an air, you're typically rotating towards the beach with the wave. You're kind of going the direction that the wave is breaking. And in that way, it kind of is intuitive that that's the direction that you would do an air. But with an alley-oop, you're rotating against that kind of flow of everything. That can throw people off pretty easily, but the truth is it's actually a really basic rotation, pretty simple. And I would argue that a lot of the biggest airs that have ever been done in surfing are alley-oops. And the reason why is because they're pretty basic. And so typically when a pro surfer is, going at a huge section and they want to do the biggest air possible, but land it, they're going to go for an alley-oop because it's just a little bit more simple. It's not too complex. And you can actually you can boost and project really high when you're doing them. But that's not exactly what we're talking about today. Today, it could be the most basic level, right? We're just talking about the fundamentals of how to land this type of air. This rotation is kind of the first rotation you should ever learn on a surfboard when it comes to doing airs, because the most simple thing that we haven't really talked about in previous episodes is this maneuver called a chop hop, because it's that kind of grindy filler move that people will do. Someone like Mason Ho makes these moves look super cool because he's just so stylish. But a lot of the times you'll see people kind of doing these tricks as, something they do as they're exiting the wave or something. But it's actually the core components of what it takes to do a chop hop are actually the same fundamentals that you would use when you're going for an alley-oop. And for that reason alone, I think the alley-oop should be one of those moves that you can progress to really quickly. Why are chop hops so easy typically? I think it's because of just the way you stand on your board. You're on your toe side rail when you're pushing to do a chop hop. I would highly advise you, if you want to learn how to do an alley-oop, that is the fundamental starting place for an alley-oop, is to learn how to do chop hops. There's a lot of alley-oops that I've done where I'll do it and I'll ride out and I'll tell myself, oh, that was just a chop hop. And then I'll paddle back, out the back, or I'll go in and someone will say, oh, that was a great alley-oop. And I'll be like, no, that was a chop hop. And they'll be like, well, I don't know. It kind of looked like an alley-oop. So there's this kind of like this gray zone where you go from doing a chop hop to doing an alley-oop. So if you want to learn how to do an alley-oop, start with the chop hop. Maybe I could make a shorter video on talking about chop hops eventually, but today I really want to focus on the alley-oop and how to really nail one and do a proper one, so you're not blurring the lines between a chop hop and an alley-oop, because no one likes a surfer that's like forcing airs or it looks kind of grindy. I'm super sad because this past week I broke my favorite airboard I have. I'm getting it replaced already, but it was super sad because it was my go-to board and I did so many airs on it. But for me, that model is a Channel Islands Happy Every Day. It's a little bit shorter, it's a little bit wider. It provides a ton of speed and a ton of pop, especially when, like me, you order it with this ECT construction, which is basically a little bit stronger, a little bit lighter, and a little bit more responsive than your typical polyurethane surfboard that's a little stiffer and stronger and heavier. That's the board I would choose if you're asking me, whatever shaper you're riding. A little bit shorter, a little bit wider. It's going to just give you a little bit more of that maneuverability and a little more of that pop. Also a little bit less rocker. We've talked about that before. Just provides more speed down the line, and speed is kind of one of those big fundamental factors for landing airs. So board. Next thing I want to talk about is the type of wave. Alley-oops, your rotation is taking you out the back behind the wave as you rotate against it. So you need a section that is pushing you much, much harder towards the beach. And the way to find that on the wave is right there in the lip, in the pocket. It's a little bit of a tricky section to find. If you want to find like the best alley-oop section ever, they're going to be a little bit more rare, but a good alley-oop section I would describe is coming from behind the breaking part of the wave, and you're finding a lip line that's throwing out. It's not so much of a closeout, it's more of an open face. And for that reason, you could do an alley-oop at somewhere like a point break, or you could do it at a wave that's more of a barreling type of wave, not so much of just a beach break. Usually I talk about frontside airs or backside airs, and I say you want to find a beach break, find a wave that's mushy and that just gives you a little closeout section. Alley-oops are a little bit different. You usually want a little bit more hollowness in the wave, something a little bit steeper, and then something that maybe doesn't close out so much, but still gives you like a coping right next to the pocket where you can kind of bounce off of. So a little bit different type of waves, right? You're not necessarily looking for a beach break closeout. Of course, going for any air, the goal is to get a lot of reps. And so you want to find uncrowded wave. You don't want to go out at a crowded lineup and then go on a good wave and fall going for an air and then wait 45 minutes to catch another wave. That just is a recipe for frustration. Any sort of reef breaks typically have a little bit more power and a little bit more energy, and so that promotes usually alley-oops and that maneuver choice. So after you've taken the right board to the right wave, the wind that you want typically is the same as any other air where you have the wind blowing at you because of your axis of rotation. Typically your board isn't just facing down the line the whole time. The bottom of your board isn't just facing down the line. At some point in the air, you can actually twist around. And so if the wind is blowing at you from down the line, if you're surfing a left and it's coming at you as you pump down the line, you might come up to do the alley-oop, and as you're rotating around, the wind will actually hit your board and push it away from you, behind you. That's generally, not very good for alley-oop. So typically the conditions I would suggest for going for an alley-oop are a light side offshore wind. That's like the most ideal. Side offshore usually is going to be the direction of wind that holds your board in place for the longest when you do an alley-oop. It's actually going to help you get more lift as well. The way that you hit the section specifically will help you get a little bit higher. And then you want it light because any sort of wind that's too strong when you're going for an alley-oop, it can disrupt the board under you and take it away from you. So I would even say that you could go for an alley-oop on a day with no wind, and you'll see a lot of pro surfers in contests go for that move when there's really light winds. Okay, now moving on. Now you're on the wave and you're pumping down the line and you really want to do an alley-oop. You're at the right spot, you're at the right conditions, and you got the right board under your feet. I think the first thing to talk about is approaching the section. And this is a little bit tricky, and I hope I explain it correctly because I mentioned it earlier, but alley-oops, you want to come from behind typically. That's the most ideal way to hit the best section, is to come from behind. The reason why is that sweet spot when you're doing an alley-oop is right next to the barrel of the wave. Like it's right next to the breaking part. And if you're already in front of that, how are you going to get there? You're looking for this kind of throwing out lip. Usually that's right there in the pocket. And so in order to get there, you really want to come from behind. Ideally, the wave is tapered and it's wider and it's kind of all going to break at once. And so you don't have to deal with that barreling white water from behind, and you're not getting thrown off or get hit in the face. Something funny, a side note, you'll see a lot of surfers actually. There's this clip of Italo Ferreira that I don't know if I could find it, but I can remember him, and I've done it a ton myself, where you're bottom turning to do an alley-oop, and because you want to find that critical little section, small section right next to the pocket, you're trying to come from behind, and as the lip is throwing, the lip like grazes your face. I have a hilarious clip I'll have to show you guys of me doing that exactly. So that's one of the things that can like happen as a byproduct of coming from behind. Ideally, you have this long stretched out wall throwing lip, and you're able to come from behind almost like you're backdooring the section. You don't want to be out on the open face because you won't be able to find the section that's behind you. So that's the main thing, is approaching the section like that. You want to come from behind and draw that line as close to that white water and barrel as you can without it hitting you. Or if you can find a more stretched out, wider wall where you're coming and you can see the lip and you can draw an easier line at it, that would be the most ideal. That's going to be one of the hardest parts about this air, is just drawing the right line into the section. Another big thing, obviously, is speed. If you don't have a lot of speed going into the section, it's going to be really tough to project up and get high enough to rotate all the way around. But speed is always going to be the one factor of doing airs that you can't leave out. You always have to have speed, because otherwise you're not going to get above the wave. You're not going to give yourself time to rotate. You're going to get more affected by the wave. So if the wave has a higher speed, or if the lip has more momentum than you do, it's gonna affect you, and you're not gonna be able to do what you want to do. So you got to have that speed as you're approaching the section. And then this right here, this part, this specific aspect of doing alley-oops is the thing that I think people they'll stop here. They'll never land an alley-oop, or they won't land it as much as they could because they don't understand this one concept. And it's kind of hard to explain, but it's the angle of your board as you hit the section. You know, if you're going front side, for me as a goofy footer, you're going down the line on the left, you're rotating counterclockwise, right? You're coming up for the section, you're going counterclockwise. For a regular footer, you're rotating clockwise. And as you hit the section, that rotation just takes you behind the wave. It just naturally will pull you behind the wave because clearly the wave is moving in and your momentum is taking you out the back. You're spinning out the back. It's like the easiest way to go out the back of a wave is to rotate that way, right? And so how do you deal with this? How do you, not make it so that every single time you want to rotate for an alley-oop, you go out the back? Well, that has to do with that specific last second before you get in the air. This is the thing that people don't realize you need to do and have in mind when you're going for an alley-oop. For that last split second, you have to find a way to get your nose pointed towards the beach, or at least down the line, so that as you hit the section, your projection is going with the wave. So just like any other air, we talk about frontside airs. You want to, as you hit the section, have your nose pointed outwards so that you're projecting with the wave and even past the wave so that you cover over the whitewater. Well, with an alley-oop, you're not really trying to cover over the whitewater because you're usually doing it on an open face. So you don't have to project as far out. We'll slow it down and we'll talk about it when I analyze a few clips. But I like to think about this idea of your bottom turning for the section, and right before you get in the air, you're thinking in your head about angling your nose outwards towards the beach. And that sounds kind of hard to keep in mind when you're going for an alley-oop because you're about to start rotating the other way. And why would it would just make things really complicated to angle towards the beach. But if you want to stay with the wave, with the pace of the wave, you have to find a way to get your projection that way. If you leave the wave angling out the back, you're going to go out the back every single time. But you want to connect with this throwing lip with your board going the direction the lip is going as you go for the alley-oop. And then as soon as you leave the wave, you can rotate any way you want because your momentum, the direction of your air, is going with the wave. So that's going to be one of the most important things that you can understand as you go for an alley-oop is that your projection still has to go with the wave. Another thing that we're going to talk about is your upper body coil. And we've talked about this with backside airs, especially. And alley-oops are essentially doing a backside air, but going frontside because the rotation is the same. But you still need to have that upper body coil. As you hit the section, you want to already have your body and your hips turning the direction that you want to spin. And so that's going to be really important, is that upper body, lower body coil as you hit the section. To nuance that direction, that angle that you're projecting at is going to be based off of the section you're hitting. And that's something that you're only going to learn through trying a lot of alley-oops. When the wave is really throwing out a big barrel, you don't need to project out so much because the wave is going to push you out. If it's not throwing out so strong, then you're going to have to angle out a little bit more and coil up a little bit more so that your projection will be with the wave. Those are the main fundamentals of an alley-oop. I hope I'm not overcomplicating it. A lot of this stuff will make sense when you go for it, but I would say the two main things you have to think about here is that angle that you're drawing into the section, making sure that you're not hitting a typical closeout or a section that's not going to project you out. You need that projection out. And you need to make sure that your board is projecting with the wave and not against the wave, just going out the back. I'll give you examples of areas that people have done where they just go out the back and examples where they project maybe too far out even. And we'll kind of walk through that. Okay, guys, so this is the first clip I want to show you. This is an example of what not to do. For one, this is a great type of wave to be going for an alley-oop on. There's some light offshore winds. And as you can see, it's a faster paced wave. I'm pumping as hard as I can down the line, and it's hollow for the most part. This is at Kandui in the Mentawais. Obviously, it doesn't look very hollow right here, but I'm going to go into a hollower section. So that's the ideal thing, right? Is down the line wave and it's hollow because it allows you to not have to draw too tight of a turn next to the barrel, get in that weird awkward position where you're trying to avoid hitting the lip, but also drawing like a line up the face. So I'm going fast down the line. I see the section, and as you can see, or as you will see, I don't do enough to project myself with the wave. So in this case, I'm focusing a little bit too much on the rotation of the alley-oop rather than the projection out. And so let's just check it out. As I come up, I'm really close to the lip right here. You can't see it so well, but I am really close. And right about here, the wave isn't throwing out a whole lot, so there's not a ton of projection out, and I'm not trying to compensate that by angling the nose of my board super far out. And so what happens is as I hit the section, I leave the water kind of facing down the line, but without a lot of projection from the wave. And as I go up to do it, I do the whole rotation, and look at that. The wave just totally passed me up. Look at that. I'm on the backside of the wave. I'm like on the downslope of the backside of the wave. And so there was no chance I was ever going to land that. The wave didn't project me enough. Partially, this is an example of a wrong section to hit because it's not throwing out enough. But also, I could have made up for it by trying to angle my board out and project with the wave. But instead, I just kind of do a normal amount of projection on a pretty soft section that's not throwing out a whole lot. And for that reason, as I come around, I go down right behind the wave. So that's an example of what not to do. Now I'm going to show you guys another example of also what not to do, but in terms of projecting too far out. So on this wave, you can see I'm getting barreled. It's a really hollow wave. I'm approaching the section actually very well, but this time I'm hitting it in such a critical part of the wave. It's barreling a little too hard, and you'll see my nose is angling at the perfect direction right here, down the line, and even a little bit out. Look at the nose of my board, how it's facing just a little bit behind 12 o'clock. That means I'm trying to angle out as I hit it. And as I launch off the section, it's throwing so hard that I'm a little bit too far in front of the wave right here. Ideally, you want to be right there at the crest of the wave and a little bit on the face, but instead this wave kept barreling underneath me, and I land right in a sketchy spot. My fins didn't even engage in the lip. They just went straight through, and I fall down just like that. So that's also an example of what not to do. This was a really barreling section. Alley-oops are all about finding that timing where it projects you out, not too far, not too little, but also onto the open face. Now I'm going to show you guys another example of a really hollow wave. This is a good side-by-side comparison with the last two clips because this is better timing. It's still a little bit of a funky section and a little bit of a forced air, but I'm just going to show you guys what better timing looks like. This was like a great conditions to be going for an alley-oop in. Offshore winds, really fast, hollow wave. I'm approaching it from behind this throwing out lip, and as I hit it, my nose is angling towards the beach. It's not angling out the back. Pretty major component of this. See, it's still, even at this point, I'm out of the water. My nose is still just barely past 12 o'clock. And then I rotate. I'm staying with the wave. So I'm projecting with the wave. And as I come down, I'm right in that sweet spot. Right at the crest of the wave. You'll see I'm kind of almost, if I had to say it, I'm a little bit on top of the wave, more so than I would want to be. But it'll work out, as you'll see. I land on top, and then the wave kind of pulls me back in, and then I ride out right there. Can't see the ride out, but I did ride out of that one. Okay, now a couple of examples of what it looks like when you're trying to force the air. There's not really a section for it, and so you have to draw that really steep angle into the wave. It'll look something like this. I'm pumping down the line. I really want to do an alley-oop, but I know that the wave doesn't have a lot of wall to do it on. And so I have to draw this really tight line right next to the lip of the wave. Look at this, just drawing a little too close. I'm obviously desiring to hit this section of the wave, but to get there, this wave, part of the wave is obviously going to be throwing out, and I just am a little bit too greedy, and I get clipped right here. Boom, right in the face. I wore that one straight on the face. At this point, it's basically like you're getting punched in the face. I have no idea where I am or what's going on, and the result is basically flopping like that. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you this for fun. All right, so that can happen sometimes. Another example of that is this one. This is also at Kandui. I'm being a little bit too greedy. I want to get really close in this section right here, up in that critical part of the wave where it's throwing out and I'm going to project out. But this wave was really sketchy to do it on, and I come up a little bit too close to the section. I get clipped in the face by the lip of the wave, and I get stuck up and lose my board. I go over the falls, and I actually hit my face on the bottom of the reef, and it did not feel good. So that's a good example of what not to do. Don't want to hit a section like that on a big wave like that and be too greedy and come up too close to the lip. Okay, now this is a straight on clip of a wave where I do an alley-oop, pretty much textbook alley-oop. This is the way that I would want to do it every time, how I would encourage everyone to try to do it. This is on a bigger wave, so there is that to keep in mind, and it's a really powerful wave. So the way I do it, I'm kind of adjusting to that situation. I've gathered a ton of speed down the line. I'm approaching this section. This wave allowed me to get really right in that sweet spot of the lip where it's going to project me out. Now, remember, when the wave projects you out a lot, you don't have to necessarily angle your board towards the beach as much. If the wave is doing that part of the air, you can kind of do your part and rotate against it. If the wave isn't throwing out so much, you want to compensate for that by angling out towards the beach and projecting out. This wave allowed me to project really far out. I was able to find that sweet spot of the lip where it was throwing, and I knew I didn't have to angle out towards the beach too much. And so I'm going to draw a really, really tight line towards that sweet spot of the lip. And as you'll see, I pump down the line. I come up right here. I want to note that my face is probably like this far from the lip. I'm getting as close as I can to the lip so that I can hit that sweet spot right here. This is what I'm aiming for. It's going to throw me out, I know, but I also know that my rotation is going to compensate for that projection by rotating against it. And so it's kind of this mathematical equation where, yes, the wave's going to project me out, but my air is going to project me out the back. And so I'm able to kind of balance it out. And then right here, my upper body is kind of getting ready to turn. Again, you don't have to coil up as much for an alley-oop, but my head, you'll see pretty early, will start turning back. So before I've even left the water, my head's already turned, looking back, almost, behind me. My board is angling out, not too much because I don't want to project out into the flats, but I also feel the wave kind of pushing against me, so I'm able to angle it right at the right direction. And then as I come up, my body's already turned all the way around. My upper body's looking behind me, and then my lower body will follow. The wind this day was perfect. It was light offshore winds, maybe a little stronger than light. So it was like, medium strength winds offshore. And that sort of wind is going to just promote you staying in the air longer. So this was super ideal. I get to the top. I'm already spotting my landing. Like at this point, early on in the air, I can already see my landing. But right here, I can spot it. This is putting me in the perfect spot. This wave wasn't super stretched out like a closeout. It was just kind of tapered. And so it allows me to have this open face section to land on. And as I come down, you'll see it's just right in that sweet spot, right in the perfect part of the wave where it's not going to be a hard landing. It's kind of soft up there in the lip, but it's not out the back. And then I compress a little bit and I come down the face of the wave just like that. Okay, so just to recap, a few of the main things we want to focus on with an alley-oop is you want to gather speed. You want to make sure that you're on the right type of wave. If the wave is too soft, you're not going to get a lot of projection out. You're going to have to overcompensate by angling your board towards the beach. That can be difficult. So ideally, you get a wave that has some projection on it. It's a little bit more hollow. You don't want to hit a closeout because a closeout is typically going to cause a lot of problems. You're going to land in the middle of that whitewash and chaos. You want an open face to land on. And so for that reason, you don't so much want a closeout. The next thing is that your angle of projection is going to be really important. You want to, for the most part, be angling down the line, or if you even can, towards the beach. You don't want to just start rotating out the back. Otherwise, you'll land out the back. And so you want to draw a really close line to that lip. Ideally, you have a wave that's down the line and pretty fast and hollow, and you can draw a pretty steep line into the lip. If you're too greedy, you'll get lipped in the face. That's not ideal. So you want to find a wave that allows you to get into that sweet spot easily. And you usually want to do that by coming from behind with a good amount of speed. The other thing is your upper body, right? So as you're hitting the section, you want to already keep in mind that you're twisting and turning. And so your upper body will lead your lower body into that spin. And then if you hit it correctly, obviously the landing is just going to be, as easy as can be. You'll be on the open face right at the top of the wave, and even sometimes carrying your speed forward down the line. This can totally be done on a tiny wave. It does not need to be done on a big wave. Alley-oops are not super exclusive to one situation. They're pretty much very, very versatile. You can do them in small crummy waves as long as you have enough of that projection and enough speed yourself. Or you can do them on really big waves. Like I said before, some of the best surfers choose to do an alley-oop when they have a really big, scary section because it's a pretty simple air and it gives you a lot of time to plan out your landing and stuff like that once you get up there. Yeah, I hope this video was really helpful. I know it went really long, so hopefully you guys were able to not get lost in the sauce, but you were you're able to, you know, pick something out of there that's helpful. And if you have any questions about it, please let me know. Any questions about struggles in different parts of that whole process, let me know. I'd be happy to respond and help out. I'll see you guys in the next video.